I never planned on crashing my father's retirement party. But life has a way of bringing things full circle. When I found that yellowed letter hidden in our attic, I discovered my mother hadn't abandoned us like my father claimed. She'd been forced out by his lies. At 18, when I confronted him with the truth, he threw me onto the street telling everyone I was pregnant and on drugs. For 15 years, I rebuilt my life from nothing, keeping that letter safe. When I received an invitation to his retirement celebration by mistake, I knew it was time. With the truth in my pocket and success at my back, I returned to expose the family secret that had destroyed 3 lives. The summer heat made the attic almost unbearable as I sorted through boxes of old Christmas decorations. My father was away on another business trip, leaving me alone in our suburban home outside Atlanta. I had just graduated high school and was preparing for college in the fall, using the summer to help organize our perpetually cluttered house. "This is the last box," I muttered to myself, wiping sweat from my forehead. The cardboard box looked different from the others tucked away behind the chimney stack. No labels, just a plain brown box sealed with yellowed packing tape. Curiosity got the better of me. I cut through the tape and lifted the lid, expecting more forgotten holiday ornaments, or perhaps old tax documents. Instead, I found photographs I'd never seen before. Dozens of them spread across the top of what looked like stacks of papers. My breath caught as I lifted one photo. A woman with my eyes and smile held a toddler version of me on her lap. My mother. She looked nothing like the unstable, uncaring woman my father had described throughout my childhood. Her eyes were kind, her smile genuine as she hugged me close. I dug deeper into the box, finding more photos of her with me at various ages, until about 7 or 8. Then nothing. It matched the timeline I'd always been told, that she'd abandoned us when I was 8, unable to handle the responsibilities of motherhood. Beneath the photos, I found something that made my heart stop. Envelopes, dozens of them, all addressed to me in flowing handwriting. All had been opened, read by someone else, and stuffed back into their envelopes. All bore return to sender stamps. With shaking hands, I opened the first letter, dated just 2 months after my mother supposedly abandoned us. "My dearest Hazel," it began. "I miss you more than words can say. Your father won't let me see you, and the court has temporarily granted him full custody while we sort things out. I want you to know, I never abandoned you. I would never leave you willingly." Letter after letter told the same story, each more desperate than the last. My mother hadn't abandoned us at all. She had caught my father having an affair with his secretary, Janet. When confronted, he had turned everything around, filing for divorce and claiming my mother was mentally unstable. The courts had granted him temporary custody, which somehow became permanent. Tears streamed down my face as I read letter after letter spanning years. My mother begging to see me, explaining her side of the story, describing her fights in court. All returned, never reaching me. Deeper in the box, I found legal documents, court filings, police reports. My father had obtained restraining orders against my mother, claiming she was harassing us. The restraining orders had been granted based on evidence he'd provided, evidence I strongly suspected was fabricated. I needed to confirm what I was reading. With trembling fingers, I called my Aunt Jessica, my father's sister. We weren't close, but she was the only relative I could think to ask. "Aunt Jessica." "It's Hazel." "Hazel, what a surprise. Is everything okay, honey?" "Not really," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I found some letters from my mom. They say Dad lied about her abandoning us, that he cheated, then kept her from seeing me. Is that true?" A long silence followed. Then, "Where did you find these letters?" "In the attic. In a hidden box." She sighed heavily. "Your father would kill me for saying this, but yes, some of that is true. Your mother didn't abandon you. She fought like hell to see you. Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked. "Your father. He has a way of controlling the narrative, Hazel. We all just eventually accepted his version. It was easier." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. I needed to find my mother. I needed to hear her side directly. I needed to confront my father with what I'd discovered. With renewed purpose, I dug through the remaining documents, looking for my mother's contact information. Instead, what I found knocked the wind out of me. An obituary dated 2 years earlier. My mother, Caroline Spencer, had died of breast cancer at age 46. I collapsed against the attic wall, clutching the obituary to my chest. I was too late. Too late to know her. Too late to hear her voice. Too late to tell her I would have chosen her if I'd known the truth. She had died believing her only daughter wanted nothing to do with her. In that stifling attic, surrounded by the evidence of my father's cruelty and deception, I made a promise to my mother's memory. I would confront him. I would make him admit what he'd done. I would reclaim the truth of my own life, even if it came 15 years too late for her. 3 days later, I heard the garage door open, signaling my father's return. I'd barely slept, barely eaten since discovering the letters. I'd spent the time organizing the evidence, preparing what I would say, how I would confront him. I needed answers. I needed the truth. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my father, George, walked in with a woman I didn't recognize. She was blonde, probably in her 30s, and dressed in an expensive-looking business suit. "Hazel," my father said, surprised to see me sitting there. "This is Pamela. She's joining us for dinner. Nice to meet you." Hazel Pamela extended her hand, which I ignored. "We need to talk," I said, looking directly at my father. "Alone." My father frowned. "Whatever you need to say can be said in front of Pamela. We're very close." I took a deep breath and pulled out the first letter. "I found these in the attic. Letters from Mom. Letters you hid from me." All color drained from my father's face. He stood frozen for a moment before his expression hardened. "You were going through my things. Those are private." "Private." I stood up, my voice rising. "They're addressed to me, letters from my mother, that you kept from me for 10 years. Pamela looked uncomfortably between us. "George, what is she talking about?" I answered before he could. "My father told me my mother abandoned us when I was 8. He told me she didn't want to be a mother anymore, that she never tried to contact me." I held up a stack of letters. "But she did. For years. He intercepted every letter, every call, every attempt she made to see me." "Hazel, you don't understand the situation." My father said, his voice dangerously calm. "Your mother was unstable. Those letters prove it. Her obsession with contacting you despite the court orders. Court orders you obtained by lying." I slammed the restraining order documents on the table. "You claimed she was harassing us when she was just trying to see her daughter." "I did what was necessary to protect you," he insisted. "Protect me?" I was shouting now. "From what?" "From knowing you cheated on Mom with your secretary. From knowing you manipulated the courts to get custody. From knowing my mother died of cancer 2 years ago. Still believing I didn't want to see her." At the mention of her death, something flickered in my father's eyes. Not grief, not remorse, but annoyance, as if her death was an inconvenience in his carefully constructed narrative. "Your mother had problems, Hazel. Mental problems. She wasn't fit to raise you." "That's not true." I pushed the obituary toward him. "She remarried. She had a career. She volunteered at a women's shelter." "Does that sound like someone who was unstable?" Pamela placed a hand on my father's arm. "George, maybe we should discuss this when everyone's calmer." I turned to her. "Did he tell you he has a daughter? Or did he erase me from his story too?" My father's face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Hazel. You're becoming hysterical just like your mother used to." "I'm nothing like what you described my mother to be," I said. "Because that person never existed. She was a fiction you created to cover your own betrayal." My father slammed his hand on the table. "I will not be spoken to this way, in my own house. This conversation is over. B. 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 It's not over," I insisted. "Why did you keep her from me? Why did you lie all these years? Why didn't you at least tell me when she died?" "Because it wasn't your business," he shouted, finally losing the cool demeanor he worked so hard to maintain. "She lost any right to you when she threatened to expose my relationship with Janet to the board of directors." The truth slipped out, hanging in the air between us. Pamela's eyes widened. So that's it, I said quietly. You were afraid for your precious career. Your reputation. Pamela said cautiously. Maybe we should. No, my father cut her off. Hazel has clearly made up her mind about what kind of man I am. Nothing I say will change that. He straightened his tie, regaining composure. If you can't respect my decisions or my privacy, then perhaps it's time you found somewhere else to live. I stared at him in disbelief. You're throwing me out for discovering the truth you've hidden for 10 years. I'm suggesting you take some time away to reconsider your attitude, he said coldly. When you're ready to apologize for going through my personal belongings and making wild accusations, we can discuss your return. I don't need time away, I said, my voice eerily calm, as a strange sense of clarity washed over me. I need a father who doesn't lie to me, who doesn't hide my mother from me, who doesn't let me believe I was abandoned when I wasn't. Then I suggest you find one, he replied. Because I've done everything for you, Hazel. Everything. And this is how you repay me. I looked at this man, this stranger, who had shaped my entire understanding of my life, with his lies, and felt something inside me break and reform stronger. I'll pack my things, I said. I went to my room and grabbed the essentials, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the small amount of savings I kept in my desk drawer. Most importantly, I took the original letter from my mother, the one that explained everything in her own words. I left the copies I'd made of the other documents on my bed. When I came downstairs with my bags, my father was on the phone. I could hear him clearly as I approached the living room. Yes, I'm worried about her, Jessica. She's making wild accusations, acting erratically. I think she might be on drugs. A pause. I don't know where she got them. That boy she was seeing, maybe. And I think she might be pregnant. She won't tell me anything. I stood in the doorway, shocked by how easily he was spinning a new narrative, creating a new fiction to explain my departure, just as he had created one to explain my mother's. He saw me and turned away, lowering his voice, but continued speaking. I walked past him to the front door without a word. As I loaded my bags into my car, my phone began buzzing with messages from family members. Is it true you're pregnant? Hazel drugs aren't the answer. Your father is worried sick about you. The lies were already spreading faster than I could counter them. I drove to my best friend Tara's house, the only place I could think to go. When I arrived, her mother answered the door with an uncomfortable expression. Hazel, I'm not sure now is a good time. Please. I said I just need a place to stay for a night or two until I figure things out. Your father called, she said, not meeting my eyes. He's very concerned about you, about the situation you're in. What situation? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The drugs. Hazel. The pregnancy. We can't have that influence around Tara. I'm sorry. The door closed gently but firmly in my face. I stood there, homeless, friendless, and completely alone, betrayed by the man who was supposed to protect me, and abandoned by those who believed his lies without question. I got back in my car and drove to a Walmart parking lot where I spent the first night of my new life alone, clutching my mother's letter and wondering how everything had fallen apart so completely in just 3 days. The first week living in my car was the hardest. I'd wake up with the sun beating through the windows, my back aching from sleeping in the reclined driver's seat. Each morning, I'd use the Walmart bathroom to wash up as best I could, brushing my teeth and changing clothes, trying to maintain some dignity in a situation that offered little. On day 8, I landed a job at Lucy's Diner, a small establishment with faded red booths and the perpetual smell of coffee and bacon. Lucy herself was a woman in her 60s with dyed red hair and more energy than seemed possible for her age. You got experience, she asked during my impromptu interview. No, I admitted, but I'm a fast learner. She eyed me carefully. Where you staying? I hesitated, embarrassed. I'm between places right now. Lucy wasn't fooled. You sleeping in that blue Honda in the parking lot? I nodded, cheeks burning. Well, she said after a moment, there's a room above the diner. Nothing fancy. Used to be storage. There's a bathroom with a shower. You can stay there while you get on your feet. Rent comes out of your paycheck. That small act of kindness saved me. The room was tiny, with just enough space for a twin bed, a dresser, and a small table. The bathroom was cramped, but functional. To me, it was a palace, compared to my car. I worked double shifts, learning the rhythm of diner life, memorizing orders, building rapport with regulars. Between shifts, I enrolled in community college, using the small savings I had to pay for classes. My father had planned to pay for my university education, but that support was gone now, along with everything else I'd taken for granted. During those early months, I tried reaching out to family members with the truth. I sent copies of my mother's letters to my aunts, uncles, and cousins. Most never responded. Those who did express skepticism or outright disbelief. Your father has explained everything my Aunt Jessica wrote. He's worried your mental health is deteriorating just like Caroline's did. Please get help, Hazel. It became clear my father had doubled down on his narrative, now claiming I was not only pregnant and on drugs, but also mentally unstable, just as he'd claimed about my mother. The parallel wasn't lost on me. 6 months into my new life, I met Eleanor. She was a regular at the diner, always sitting in booth 7, always ordering the same thing: black coffee and avocado toast, with a side of fruit. She would stay for hours working on her laptop. One day, she caught me looking over her shoulder at her presentation slides. "Interested in marketing?" she asked. "Just curious," I said, embarrassed at being caught. "Sorry, don't be. What do you think of this campaign concept?" She turned her laptop toward me. I hesitated, then gave my honest opinion. "The message is getting lost in all those graphics. And your tagline doesn't match the mood of the images." Eleanor raised her eyebrows, then smiled. "You've got a good eye. Are you in school?" "Community college. Business administration." Our conversations became a regular thing. Eleanor worked at Madison and Reed, a mid-sized marketing firm in the city. When I finished my associate degree 2 years later, she helped me get an entry-level position as a marketing assistant. My tiny room above the diner gave way to a small studio apartment. The studio eventually became a 1-bedroom. I worked my way up from assistant to coordinator to specialist. I discovered I had a talent for identifying market trends and creating campaigns that resonated with target audiences. For the first time since being thrown out, I felt I was building something real, something that couldn't be taken away by someone else's lies. Throughout those years, I kept my mother's letter in a fireproof box under my bed. It was my talisman, my proof that my memories hadn't been manufactured, that the betrayal had been real. Sometimes late at night, I would read it, tracing my fingers over her handwriting, trying to conjure some memory of her voice, her laugh, her scent. But those memories had been stolen from me first by my father's lies, then by time and distance. 4 years after being thrown out, I was attending a marketing conference in Chicago when I literally bumped into my cousin Ryan in the hotel lobby. "Hazel," he said clearly, shocked to see me. "Oh my God, is that really you?" We stood there awkwardly, years of family drama hanging between us. "It's me," I confirmed. "How are you, Ryan?" "I'm good, really good." "But what happened to you? After rehab, you just disappeared. The family thought you might be ashamed or something." I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. "Rehab." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "For the drugs and, after you lost the baby." In that moment, I understood the full extent of my father's deception. He hadn't just told the family I was pregnant and on drugs when he threw me out. He'd created an entire fictional aftermath, a stint in rehab, a lost pregnancy, a disappearance motivated by shame. "Ryan," I said carefully, "I was never on drugs. I was never pregnant. I never went to rehab. Dad threw me out because I found letters from Mom that he'd hidden from me for years, letters that proved he'd lied about her abandoning us." Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "What? That's not what Uncle George told everyone." "I know what he told everyone. None of it was true." We found a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, and I told him everything. The discovery of the letters, the confrontation, the aftermath. I showed him pictures of my apartment, My business cards from Madison and Reed, my transcript from community college, showing the dean's list status I'd maintained while working full-time. I don't know what to say, Ryan finally managed. It's a lot to take in. You don't have to say anything, I assured him. Just know that whatever stories you've heard about me these past 4 years came from the same man who lied about my mother for a decade. As we parted ways, Ryan hugged me tightly. I'm sorry we all believed him, Hazel. It was the first acknowledgement from anyone in my family that perhaps my father's narrative wasn't the absolute truth. It wasn't vindication, but it was something. A small crack in the wall of lies that had separated me from my past. 10 years passed, each one taking me further from the scared homeless 18-year-old I'd once been. At 28, I had become the youngest marketing executive at Crestview Partners, one of the top firms in the Southeast. I had my own apartment in a doorman, building a healthy savings account, and the professional respect of peers twice my age. My personal transformation had been just as significant as my professional one. The raw, wounded girl had given way to a woman who carefully guarded her heart and her history. Few people knew my background. It was easier that way to present a clean narrative rather than explain the messy reality of family betrayal and abandonment. Occasionally, usually late at night when the city quieted, I would search for information about my family online. My father had remarried twice more, since throwing me out each wife younger than the last. According to his social media, which was sparse but informative, he was now a senior vice president at his company, his career having flourished in the years since he'd chosen it over truth and family. My extended family maintained contact with him, judging by the photos of holiday gatherings and birthday celebrations. Sometimes I would study these images, noting the new children, the aging faces, the celebrations I'd missed. I never reached out. The risk of rejection, of being disbelieved again, was too great. In those 10 years, I dated casually but never seriously until I met Michael. He was an executive at a partner firm. Intelligent and perceptive, with kind eyes that saw more than I sometimes wanted him to see. You never talk about your family, he observed one night over dinner, 6 months into our relationship. Every time the subject comes up, you change it. Why? I considered deflecting again, giving the sanitized version I offered most people estranged for personal reasons, no dramatic story. But something about Michael's steady gaze made me hesitate. It's complicated, I finally said. And not a very happy story. I'd still like to hear it. If you want to tell me. So I did. For the first time in years, I told someone the full, unvarnished truth. The discovery of the letters, my father's lies, the false accusations, the homelessness, the struggle to rebuild. As I spoke, I realized how long I'd carried this story alone, how heavy it had become. Michael listened without interruption until I finished. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you for trusting me with that, he said simply. His response was not pity, which I couldn't have borne, but something closer to respect. In the weeks that followed, he encouraged me to consider therapy, something I'd always resisted, equating it somehow with giving power to my father's claims about my mental stability. It's not about being broken, Michael insisted. It's about processing trauma you've never fully addressed. With his support, I found a therapist who specialized in family estrangement. Dr. Marshall helped me understand that my hesitation to build close relationships, my perfectionism, my fear of vulnerability, all stemmed from the profound betrayal I'd experienced. The work was painful but necessary, forcing me to examine wounds I'd thought were long healed. During this period of self-discovery, Michael and I grew closer. His patience, his willingness to give me space when I needed it, while remaining steadfastly present, created a safety I hadn't experienced since childhood. When he proposed a year later, I felt simultaneous joy and panic. I want to say yes, I told him honestly, but I feel like I need to resolve my past before I can fully step into our future. What would resolution look like, he asked. I'd never really considered the question before. I don't know. Reconciliation seems impossible. Forgiveness feels premature. What about understanding? Michael suggested. Not for your father, but for yourself. Learning more about your mother, who she was, what happened to her after the separation. The idea took hold. My mother had been reduced to fragments in my mind. The woman in the photographs. The author of the letters. The obituary. Announcing her death. But she had been a whole person with a life I knew almost nothing about. I wouldn't even know where to start, I admitted. Social media friends. Where did she live at the end? The obituary had mentioned Charlotte, North Carolina. With nothing but that city and my mother's name, Caroline Spencer, I began searching. It took weeks of dead ends before I found a lead, a Facebook memorial page created after her death. The page mentioned her work at a women's shelter called New Beginnings. I called the shelter explaining I was Caroline's daughter searching for information about her life. Caroline Spencer. The woman on the phone responded. Oh, honey. Claire worked with her for years. They were best friends. Let me give you her number. Claire. A name I'd never heard attached to a life my mother had built without me. With shaking hands, I dialed the number. Hello, a warm voice answered. Is this Claire who knew Caroline Spencer? Yes. Who's this? My name is Hazel. Caroline was my mother. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Hazel. Caroline's Hazel. Yes. Oh my God. Her voice cracked. We looked for you. For years we looked for you. You did. Of course we did. Caroline never stopped hoping she'd find you again. Where are you? Can we meet? Claire lived just 2 hours away. We arranged to meet that weekend, my heart racing with a mixture of hope and terror at the prospect of finally connecting with someone who had known my mother, who had been part of her life when I couldn't be. As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in 15 years, I was moving toward my past rather than away from it. Whatever I discovered, whatever truths awaited me, I was finally ready to face them. The cafe where Claire and I agreed to meet was busy with Saturday morning customers. I arrived 20 minutes early, too anxious to sit at home waiting. I'd changed outfits 3 times that morning, unsure what to wear to meet a stranger who knew more about my mother than I did. I recognized Claire immediately when she walked in, though we'd never exchanged photos. Something in the way she scanned the room, the slight tilt of her head as she searched for me, reminded me of the photographs I'd seen of my mother. They had been friends long enough to adopt each other's mannerisms. She spotted me and stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. I stood as she approached, unsure of the proper protocol for this unprecedented situation. Hazel, she said, her voice thick with emotion. My God, you look just like her. Without warning, she pulled me into a tight embrace. I stiffened at first, then gradually relaxed, allowing myself to be held by this woman who had known and loved my mother. I'm sorry, she said, pulling back and wiping tears. It's like seeing a ghost. A beautiful ghost. We sat down, ordered coffee, and for a moment simply studied each other. Claire was in her 50s with silver threading through her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. I don't know where to start, I admitted. Neither do I, Claire replied. We looked for you, you know. After Caroline got sick, she wanted so desperately to see you before. Her voice trailed off. You couldn't find me because my father told everyone I didn't want contact with anyone from my mother's side, I said. He controlled the narrative completely. Claire nodded grimly. That's what we suspected. George always was good at manipulating situations to his advantage. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I brought some things I thought you might want. Photos, mostly. And some letters Caroline wrote to you but never sent. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of photographs spanning years I knew nothing about. My mother at what appeared to be her second wedding. My mother laughing with Claire at what looked like a beach. My mother thin and pale in a hospital bed, still smiling despite what must have been terrible pain. She remarried, I asked, pointing to the wedding photo. Yes, to Thomas. They were together for 8 years before she died. He's a wonderful man. He helped her through the cancer treatment, never left her side. Is he still? Still alive. Yes, still in Charlotte. He has more of Caroline's things. Journals, personal effects. Things he thought you should have if we ever found you. I looked up sharply. He kept things for me, even though he never met me. Claire smiled sadly. Caroline talked about you every day, Hazel. You were never far from her thoughts. Thomas felt like he knew you through her stories. When she died, he promised he'd keep trying to find you to give you the things she wanted you to have. I spent hours with Claire learning about the life my mother had built after being separated from me. How she'd struggled initially fighting depression and a sense of powerlessness in the face of my father's legal maneuvers. How she'd eventually channeled her pain into helping other women working at the shelter, advocating for changes to family court procedures. Would he meet with me? I asked, as our time together drew to a close. Thomas. He'd be overjoyed, Claire assured me. We can go see him now if you want. He only lives about 20 minutes from here. Thomas lived in a modest rancher with a well-tended garden. When Claire introduced us in his living room, he embraced me with the same emotion Claire had shown, as if I were a long-lost relative rather than a stranger. I can't believe you're really here, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Caroline would have been so happy. He brought out boxes of my mother's belongings carefully preserved. Journals spanning years, photo albums, letters, legal documents, detailing her fight to regain access to me. She kept everything, Thomas explained. Said someday you'd want to know the whole story. I opened one of the journals at random, my eyes falling on an entry from what would have been my 10th birthday. Hazel turns 10 today. I wonder if she's having a party. If she still likes chocolate cake with strawberry ice cream, or if her tastes have changed. George won't let me call. The court says I can send a card, but I know he won't give it to her. I bought her a locket anyway. I'm keeping it safe until I can give it to her myself. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. She never stopped trying to reach me. Never, Thomas confirmed. Even when the legal avenues seemed exhausted, she kept looking for ways. He handed me a small box. Inside was a silver locket, never worn, with my birth date engraved on the back. She bought you something every birthday, every Christmas, Thomas explained. Said she'd give them all to you when she found you again. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Thomas shared more details about my mother's life, their marriage, her illness. He showed me medical records, treatment plans, hospice arrangements. Through it all, I saw evidence of a woman who had lived with purpose and love despite profound loss. There's one more thing, Thomas said as I prepared to leave. Something Caroline wrote for you near the end when she knew she wouldn't survive to tell you herself. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written on it in shaky handwriting, so different from the flowing script of the letters I'd found in the attic. She asked me to give this to you, if we ever found you. Said it contained everything she wanted you to know if she couldn't tell you herself. I clutched the letter to my chest, unable to open it, yet overwhelmed by the day's revelations. Thank you for keeping it safe. For keeping all of this safe. There's more, Thomas said hesitantly. Documents Caroline collected during the divorce and custody battle. Things that might still have consequences for your father. What kind of documents? Thomas retrieved another file. Evidence that George bribed Judge Harmon during the custody hearing. Bank transfers, recorded conversations. Caroline couldn't use any of it at the time because her lawyer said it had been obtained improperly. But she kept it, thinking someday it might matter. I stared at the file, understanding the implications immediately. Bribing a judge was a serious crime, one with statutes of limitations measured in decades rather than years. If these documents contained what Thomas suggested, my father could face criminal charges. The knowledge was a weight and a weapon both. I wasn't sure I wanted the responsibility of either. Can I think about this? I asked, indicating the file. Of course, Thomas said. It's yours now. All of it is. Whatever you decide to do with it, Caroline would support you. As I drove back to the city that night, my car filled with boxes of my mother's life, I felt both heavier and lighter. Heavier, with the knowledge of how much she had suffered, how hard she had fought, how thoroughly my father had deceived us both. Lighter with the certainty that I had been loved constantly and completely by the mother I'd been told had abandoned me. That night, I finally opened her last letter to me. Written in the shaky hand of someone battling terminal illness, it contained no recriminations against my father, no bitterness about the years stolen from us, only love, forgiveness, and a mother's hopes for her daughter's future. Whatever he told you about me, know this was true. I loved you every moment of every day. I fought for you until I couldn't fight anymore. And I forgive you for believing him, because children should be able to trust their parents. My greatest hope is that someday you'll learn the truth. And when you do that, you'll find a way to forgive yourself for what was never your fault. Live fully, love deeply, and be happy, my beautiful girl. That's all I've ever wanted for you. As I fell asleep that night surrounded by fragments of my mother's life, I felt her presence more strongly than I had in 15 years. And in that presence, I found a piece I hadn't known I was missing. 15 years had passed since the day my father threw me out of his house and his life. 15 years of building a new existence from nothing, of learning to trust again, of discovering the truth about my mother and myself. At 33, I was a different woman than the terrified teenager who had slept in her car that first night, clutching a letter as if it were a lifeline. I was reviewing campaign proposals in my office when the email arrived. At first, I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam given the unfamiliar sender. Something made me open it instead. You are cordially invited to celebrate the retirement of George Harrington, Senior Vice President of Operations, after 35 years of dedicated service to Henderson Financial Group. I stared at the screen, blood rushing in my ears. My father's retirement party. The email detailed an evening celebration at the Grand Hotel downtown, with family, friends, and colleagues gathering to honor his professional achievements and dedication to family values. The irony was almost too much to bear. I scrolled to the bottom of the invitation, noting the sender, Melissa Davis, executive assistant to the CEO. This wasn't a personal invitation. It was a mass email that had mistakenly included me, probably pulled from some outdated company contact list. My father would never have willingly included me in this celebration of his carefully curated life. I should delete it, I thought. This had nothing to do with me anymore. I had built a life without him, found happiness despite him. What purpose would it serve to reopen old wounds? And yet, as I stared at the invitation, something shifted inside me. For 15 years, my father had controlled the narrative about me just as he had controlled the narrative about my mother before me. He had painted me as unstable, pregnant, drug-addicted, a cautionary tale rather than a daughter. He had erased my mother's fight to remain in my life, replacing it with a fiction of abandonment that served his purposes. And now he would be honored as a pillar of the community, a family man. His decades of lies and manipulation, hidden beneath accolades and champagne toasts. I picked up my phone and called Michael, who had become my husband 2 years earlier, after I'd found the courage to say yes to a future unburdened by my past. Have you seen the email? I asked when he answered. About the marketing conference. Yes, I was going to ask if you wanted to attend together. No, not that one. My father's retirement party. A pause. Your father. How did you get invited to that? Mistake, I think. But Michael, I'm thinking about going. Another longer pause. Are you sure? That's what you want. After everything he did. I'm not sure, I admitted. But I keep thinking about my mother. How she died without ever getting to tell her side of the story. How he got to define who she was. Not just to me, but to everyone. And he's been doing the same thing to me for 15 years. What would you hope to accomplish by going? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself since opening the email. Closure, maybe. The chance to reclaim my own narrative. I don't know exactly, but I've been hiding from this part of my life for so long, letting him define who I am to the people who once knew me. Maybe it's time I defined myself. After talking it through with Michael and my therapist, Dr. Marshall, I made my decision. I would attend the retirement party not to cause a scene or seek revenge, but to finally stand in my truth after years of living with my father's lies. The weeks leading up to the event were filled with preparation, both practical and emotional. I worked with Dr. Marshall to strengthen my resolve, to clarify my intentions, to prepare for the various reactions I might face. This isn't about punishing your father, she reminded me during one session. It's about reclaiming your story and finding closure for yourself. I reached out to my cousin Ryan, with whom I'd maintained sporadic contact since our chance meeting years earlier. He confirmed details about the party, and admitted that many family members had privately questioned my father's version of events over the years, especially as his subsequent marriages had failed amidst rumors of infidelity and controlling behavior. People aren't as convinced by Uncle George's stories as they once were, Ryan told me. But no one's had the courage to challenge him directly. The night before the party, I drove to the cemetery where my mother was buried. I'd visited her grave several times since connecting with Claire and Thomas, finding comfort in the quiet space where I could talk to her, share my life with her in some small way. I sat on the grass beside her headstone, placing fresh flowers in the built-in vase. "I'm going to see him tomorrow," I said aloud. "For the first time in 15 years. I'm scared, Mom. Scared of facing him. Scared of not being believed. Scared of letting you down somehow." A soft voice behind me broke into my thoughts. "You must be Hazel." I turned to find a young woman, perhaps early 20s, standing a few feet away. She had my father's eyes, but none of his hardness. "I am," I confirmed, standing. "And you are Ashley, your half-sister." She offered a tentative smile. "Dad's daughter from his second marriage." I'd known of her existence through social media glimpses, but had never expected to meet her. Certainly not here. "How did you know where to find me?" "Ryan told me you sometimes visit Mom's grave. Caroline's grave, I mean." She shifted uncomfortably. "I've wanted to meet you for a long time, but Dad, well, he doesn't like when your name comes up." "I can imagine," I said dryly. "The things he says about you, I never quite believed them." Ashley stepped closer. "He says similar things about my mom, now that they're divorced. That she's unstable, manipulative. But that's not the mother I know." Understanding dawned. "He's using the same playbook." Ashley nodded. "When I found out you were coming to the retirement party, I wanted to meet you first. To tell you, you're not alone. I believe you. About what Dad did to you. To your mom. And I want to stand with you tomorrow." I studied this young woman, this sister I'd never known, seeing in her a courage I recognized. The courage to question the narrative, to seek the truth, even when it threatened to upend everything you thought you knew. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Standing with me tomorrow won't make things easier for you." Ashley's jaw set in a determined line that reminded me startlingly of my own reflection. "I'm sure. It's time someone stood up to him. For all of us." As we left the cemetery together, I felt a curious lightening. Tomorrow would be difficult. Perhaps the most difficult day since my father had thrown me out 15 years earlier. But for the first time, I wouldn't be facing my past alone. I would have allies, people who knew the truth, who believed in me. My husband, my half-sister, perhaps others. And I would have my mother's truth preserved in her letters, her journals, her last message to me. The truth that had waited 15 years to be heard. The Grand Hotel gleamed with polished marble and crystal chandeliers as I approached the ballroom where my father's retirement celebration was being held. Michael squeezed my hand reassuringly as we paused outside the entrance, the sounds of conversation and clinking glasses drifting through the partially open doors. "Ready?" he asked quietly. I touched the letter in my blazer pocket, my mother's final letter brought along as a talisman against the doubt that threatened to overwhelm me even now. "Ready." We entered the ballroom, Ashley having arranged to meet us inside. The space was elegantly decorated with congratulatory banners and professional photographs of my father throughout his career displayed on easels around the perimeter. A large screen cycled through images of him at company events with clients with his various families over the years. I noticed the strategic editing immediately. Photos with my mother had been cropped to remove her or excluded entirely. The timeline jumped from his early career directly to his second marriage, as if the 15 years with my mother had never existed. Similarly, there were no images of me at any age. No evidence that George Harrington had a first daughter named Hazel. Our entrance didn't go unnoticed. Conversation near the door stuttered and stopped, as people recognized me, whispers spreading across the room like ripples in a pond. I caught fragments as we moved deeper into the space. "Is that? Thought she disappeared years ago. Wonder if George knows she's here." Then I saw him. My father stood near a small stage at the front of the room, surrounded by executives in expensive suits, looking essentially unchanged despite the 15 years since I'd seen him last. A few more lines around his eyes, perhaps hair more gray than brown now, but still exuding the same confident authority that had defined him throughout my childhood. He hadn't noticed me yet. I took advantage of those final moments of invisibility to scan the room for familiar faces. Aunt Jessica stood near the bar looking uncomfortable as she spotted me. Uncle David and his wife near the buffet, openly staring. Cousins, family, friends, colleagues. I vaguely remembered from company picnics and holiday parties long ago. And then Ashley emerging from a group to make her way toward us, determination in every step. "You came," she said, embracing me briefly before shaking Michael's hand. "He doesn't know yet. The CEO is about to begin the formal program. Dad will be called up to speak after a few introductory remarks." As if on cue, a distinguished man in his 60s approached the podium on the small stage, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. The room quieted as he began speaking about my father's contributions to Henderson Financial, his leadership, his integrity. Each word of praise felt like a mockery of the truth I knew. I barely registered the specifics of the speech, too aware of the growing number of eyes on me as more people realized who I was. And then finally my father saw me. Our eyes locked across the room, and I watched the color drain from his face. And now the CEO was saying, "I'd like to invite George to say a few words about his time with us and his plans for retirement." My father approached the stage, visibly shaken but rallying quickly. Ever the performer, I thought. As he took his place at the podium, his eyes found me again, a flash of anger replacing the initial shock. "Thank you, Richard, for those kind words," he began, voice steady despite his obvious discomfort. "It's been my privilege to work with Henderson Financial these past 35 years. When I think about what's made my career successful, two things come to mind: dedication to excellence in all things, and the support of family. My wife, Linda, has been my rock these past 5 years." As he continued speaking, praising his current wife, acknowledging his daughter Ashley and her academic achievements, I felt a calm determination replace the anxiety that had plagued me all day. He was doing it again, rewriting history, excluding the inconvenient parts, creating the narrative that served him best. When he finished speaking to polite applause, the CEO announced that dinner would be served shortly and invited everyone to continue enjoying the cocktail hour. My father stepped down from the stage and immediately began moving toward a side exit, clearly intending to avoid a confrontation. Now Ashley asked, seeing my focus on his retreating figure. I nodded, and we moved purposefully toward him, Michael slightly behind us. We intercepted my father just before he reached the door. "Hello, Dad," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden hush that had fallen over our corner of the room. He froze, then turned slowly to face me. "Hazel, this is a private event. You weren't invited." "Actually, I was," I replied, keeping my voice level. "A fortunate administrative error. I thought it was about time I attended a family gathering, considering how long it's been." "This isn't the place for family drama," he said, lowering his voice and glancing around at the curious onlookers. "If you want to talk, we can arrange something private. Like you arranged private conversations about me telling everyone I was pregnant and on drugs when you threw me out for discovering Mom's letters." I didn't bother keeping my voice down. "Security," my father called to a uniformed man standing nearby. "This woman is causing a disturbance. She's not supposed to be here." "Actually, I have an invitation," I said, producing the email from my purse. "And I have every right to be here." The security guard looked uncertainly between us. Ashley stepped forward. "She's my sister, Dad. Your daughter. She has as much right to be here as I do." My father's face hardened as he looked at Ashley. "We'll discuss your behavior later, young lady. For now, I suggest you remember where your loyalties should lie." "With the truth," Ashley suggested. "Because I've heard enough lies from you to last a lifetime." By now, a small crowd had gathered around us, family members and close colleagues drawn by the unfolding drama. I saw Aunt Jessica hovering anxiously at the edge of the group. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic," my father said to me, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Just like your mother. Never knowing when to let things go." "Let things go," I repeated, incredulous. Like the fact that you lied about Mom abandoning us, that you hid her letters to me for years, that you threw me out for discovering the truth, then told everyone I was pregnant and on drugs to cover your tracks. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. I saw uncertainty on faces that moments before had shown only judgment. Your mother was unstable. My father insisted, falling back on his familiar narrative. The letters. The way she harassed us after the divorce. Her obsession with contacting you despite the court orders. Everything I did was to protect you. Protect me. By keeping me from her. By letting me believe she abandoned me when she was fighting desperately to see me. By not even telling me when she died of cancer. George, Aunt Jessica's voice came from behind me, tentative but clear. Is that true? Did Caroline really try to contact Hazel all those years? My father shot her a warning look. Stay out of this, Jessica. But my aunt stepped forward, newfound courage, straightening her spine. No, I don't think I will. I've stayed out of it for too long. I knew Caroline wrote to Hazel. I knew you intercepted those letters. I told myself it was for the best that you knew what you were doing. But I've never forgotten the look on Hazel's face when you told her mother had abandoned her. That was a lie. Wasn't it? All of it was a lie. You don't understand, my father began, but Jessica cut him off. I understand perfectly. I understood 15 years ago when you called me spinning that ridiculous story about Hazel being pregnant and on drugs. She was 18, George. A straight-A student, headed to college. None of it made sense, but I didn't question you. I should have. Others were speaking up now. Long-held doubts, finally finding voice. I never believed Hazel was on drugs, my Uncle David said. Not for a minute. And the timing never made sense, my cousin Ryan added. One day she's fine, the next she's supposedly having some kind of breakdown. Come on, Uncle George. My father's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. I don't have to defend myself to any of you. Hazel was troubled then, and she's clearly troubled now if she's dredging up ancient history at what's supposed to be a celebration. Ancient history. I pulled my mother's final letter from my pocket. Mom died believing I didn't want to see her because of your lies. That's not ancient history to me. I turned to address the gathered crowd directly. My father threw me out at 18 because I found letters my mother had written me. Letters he'd hidden for years. Letters that proved she hadn't abandoned us like he claimed, but had been fighting to remain in my life while he did everything in his power to erase her. When I confronted him, he told everyone I was pregnant and on drugs to discredit me, just as he told everyone my mother was unstable to discredit her. For 15 years I've let his lies define me to the people who once knew me. I'm not doing that anymore. My father moved toward me, lowering his voice to a threatening hiss. You're making a scene. If you have any sense at all, you'll leave now, before you embarrass yourself further. I'm not embarrassed, Dad. I'm not the one whose entire life is built on lies. As I spoke those words, I saw my father's control finally snap. He grabbed my arm, fingers digging painfully into my flesh. You ungrateful little. Michael stepped forward immediately, his voice cold. Take your hand off my wife. Now. My father released me, but the damage was done. The mask had slipped, revealing the man beneath the carefully constructed facade. A man who resorted to intimidation when his lies were threatened. Your retirement celebration seems to have taken an unexpected turn, George said, a voice from behind us. The CEO, Richard, stood watching with concerned eyes. Perhaps we should continue this another time. There's nothing to continue, my father insisted. My daughter has some misguided grievances she's chosen to air inappropriately. It doesn't change anything about my record with this company, doesn't it? I asked quietly. What about the evidence that you bribed Judge Harmon during your custody battle? The documented proof in Mom's files. Do you think the board of directors would be interested in that information? All color drained from my father's face. That's a lie. There's no evidence. There is, I said. Mom collected it all. Bank transfers, recorded conversations. She couldn't use it then because it was obtained improperly, but it exists. I have it all now. You're bluffing, he whispered, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? Would you like me to describe the contents of those recordings to your CEO, to your colleagues, to your current wife, to, 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 to your current wife? For perhaps the first time in his life, my father had no ready response, no convenient lie to deploy. He simply stared at me, seeing not the frightened teenager he had discarded, but a woman who had built herself from the ground up, who had discovered the truth he'd tried so hard to bury, who now stood before him unbroken and unafraid. The aftermath unfolded with a surreal quality. Family members approached me one by one, offering apologies, expressing shock, asking questions I'd waited 15 years to answer. Richard, my father's CEO, quietly asked for a private meeting the following week. My father left with his current wife, his celebration effectively over. Aunt Jessica embraced me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Hazel. I should have questioned him. I should have reached out to you." "It's okay," I told her, finding that I meant it. He was very convincing. He fooled everyone for a long time. As the evening wound down, I found myself sitting at a table with Ashley, Michael, Ryan, and several other cousins, sharing stories about my mother, about my life these past 15 years, about the journey that had led me back to this moment of reckoning. "What will you do now?" Ryan asked. "About the evidence, I mean. Will you turn it over to the authorities?" I considered the question carefully. I don't know yet. Part of me wants him to face consequences for what he did. But another part just wants to move forward. The truth is out now, at least among the people who matter to me. Maybe that's enough. As we prepared to leave, Ashley hugged me tightly. "Thank you for coming tonight, for standing up to him. You've given me courage to do the same." "We're sisters," I said, the words feeling strange and wonderful on my tongue. "We should know each other. I'd like that if you would." "I'd like that too," she replied, smiling through tears. In the months that followed, I established a scholarship in my mother's name at the women's shelter, where she had volunteered helping young adults who had been estranged from their families due to circumstances beyond their control. I reconnected with family members who reached out with sincere apologies and desire to rebuild relationships. I shared my mother's letters and journals with Ashley, helping her know the woman who would have been her stepmother. As for my father, he retired as planned, but with considerably less fanfare than he had anticipated. The evidence of his judicial bribery was eventually turned over to the Bar Association's Ethics Committee rather than criminal prosecutors, resulting in professional consequences for both him and the judge involved, but no jail time. It seemed a fitting resolution, targeting the career he had prioritized above truth and family. Michael and I finally set a wedding date for the vow renewal ceremony we'd been discussing for years, inviting my newly reconnected family, including Ashley as my maid of honor. The ceremony would be held in the spring, near the anniversary of my mother's death, a way of including her in this celebration of love and new beginnings. 1 week before the ceremony, I visited my mother's grave one last time as just Hazel. My next visit, I would be Hazel Barrett, taking Michael's name officially in this new chapter of my life. I placed her original letter on the headstone, the one that had started everything 15 years earlier, the one I'd carried with me through homelessness and rebuilding, and finally reconciliation. "I kept my promise, Mom," I said quietly. "I found the truth. I reclaimed our story, and I found a way to forgive not just myself but even him eventually. I'm at peace now." As I walked away from the grave, I felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with discovery, in a hot attic 15 years ago, had finally closed. The girl who had been defined by abandonment and lies had become a woman defined by truth and resilience. The truth, as my mother had written in her final letter, had indeed set me free. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your father publicly, or chosen a different path to resolution? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. And if you know someone who might find comfort in knowing they're not alone in family estrangement, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the courage to face your own truths, whatever they may be.